Hi, my name is Alan Idinian. I'm an apartment building broker in Southern California. I help apartment building owners with their properties. I help them figure out the value of their properties. I help advise them on what they should do to increase the value. And if needed, I help them sell it. I used to be an attorney helping property owners. And in that former life, I used to help them with drafting leases or evictions. But I saw a need. I saw a need that owners needed someone who was more than transactional. I saw a need that they needed someone who was more of an advisor that was with them for the long term. And that's why I took the leap and went to the brokerage side, because now I can be an advisor to my clients, to these property owners, to these apartment building owners, and really help them increase the value of their property and get the most out of what they have. So today my guest is Seth Phillips, also known as Mr. ADU, founder and owner of ADU Gold, a premier design and build company in Southern California that's helped thousands of property owners with their ADU needs. He's the foremost expert. People go to him for advice and figure out what's going on with all the changing laws constantly. Today, Seth, I'd like to have you talk about how ADUs help apartment building owners specifically. Because as we know, apartment building owners are business owners, and so they're looking to see how they can increase cash flow and increase the value of their properties. And one way we're seeing this is with adding ADUs, right? You add a couple more units, now you've got additional revenue, and the cost and the value of the property is going up. So with that being said, let's shoot straight into it. So Seth, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into the ADU world?
Great. Well, thanks for having me on your show today. I really appreciate it. This is what I do. I'm the guy that's out there spreading the word of ADU, and that's why I am Mr. ADU. So just a quick backstory. I'm originally from Minnesota, you betcha, and you'll still hear a little bit of that in my voice as we talk, but I've lived in the Los Angeles area for over 28 years now, and I've been a licensed real estate broker for over 25 years. But I went into the development business because I was cruising along as a real estate agent and loved the job and paid really well. And then all of a sudden, 2007, something happened and the bottom just fell out of the market, and just seemed like literally overnight I went from having this great job that I loved to being unemployed. So I looked around for some alternative things that I could do while the market was hopefully healing. And so I decided to go into the foreclosure house flipping business. So with some partners, we were buying properties at the courthouse steps. And these numbers sound crazy, and it really wasn't that long ago, but we were buying houses for $120,000 in Los Angeles. Wow. And then we were fixing up them, then we were able to sell them for $180,000. Now, for people that flip homes, of course, you have the cost of actually doing the work to flip the home, and then you have your buying and selling costs, and then you have your carrying costs. So with that kind of a spread, there wasn't much meat on that bone. So that actually then required me to learn another set of skills, and that was how to do the same thing but do it in volume. And there was plenty of volume available then. So we did. And then as the market did slowly began to heal, we just started to flip homes in more and more expensive neighborhoods until we got all the way to the top of that food chain, where we were doing ground up new construction in the ultra luxury market in like Beverly Hills, Bel Air, Hollywood Hills. And those homes weren't selling for $180,000. Those homes were selling for $10 million. And that involved yet another skill set, because those projects are so complicated that from the time you start to the time that you can bring it to market is like 2 years. And everybody knows in the real estate world, there's one universal rule, and that is it moves in ups and downs. Sometimes it's moving up, but sometimes it's moving down. And we'd been in a upward appreciating market for a while then. So I was just starting to get more cognizant that soon there would be a turn in the market. And we were what you would call spec builders, which means we were having to spend millions of dollars to buy the dirt, millions of dollars in the construction, and then betting that 2 years into the future, all of that money and work would be rewarded. Well, a lot can go wrong in 2 years. So we were just starting to get a little bit more nervous about that. So we kind of changed our focus a little bit. We decided to scale it back. So we found a probate property in Culver City, and we purchased that for $735,000 with the intention of doing what we had been doing, but scaled back. So we were going to do a smaller development, something with a exit price of around $2 million, where we felt we could do it faster, less money, less risk. So we bought it and we hired the architect. And this is just one of these fate things. Virtually the same day that those plans were finished, I was in a car driving to look at some more property with my business partner at the time. And all of a sudden he told me about this new ADU law. And there was just something about that was so profound that this is just one of those moments that everybody has where something really happens in your life and you remember that, but you remember everything about that moment. And I remember I was sitting in the passenger seat in the car. I remember looking out the window at the hill on the side. I remember the sound of his voice. And I immediately just deep dived into the ADU topic. And the more I studied it and the more I researched it, the more I just came to believe that this was going to be the future of real estate. So we completely switched gears. And instead of knocking down the existing house, we just beautifully remodeled it. And then in the backyard, we built the first 2-story with rooftop deck luxury ADU in the city of Los Angeles. And I'm very happy to say that that project worked because, as I said, we bought it for $735,000. We sold that property for $1,805,000. So it actually worked.
Wow. And so what year was that when you did that house with ADU?
That was 2018.
2018. And a lot has changed since then, I'm imagining.
Oh, yes, yeah. And speaking to your point of the kind of the topic that we're on about multifamily, the second ADU law went into effect in 2020, and that's when they added multifamily properties into the equation. They also then upped the ante for single-family properties to be able to have 2 ADUs instead of just 1. But the multifamily part of the law is what really changed the game, particularly for all the people like us that were in that business. Because one of the challenges with the single-family homeowner is that besides all of the business things that are involved, this is their home. This is going to be in their backyard. They're going to be living with this thing. So they look at this with a completely different set of eyes in every way, all of which just create more time and effort and challenges in the process. With the multifamily people, it got to the point where the question stopped being, should I do it, to why wouldn't you? The government now just gave you an opportunity to add more income producing assets to properties you already have, which weren't allowed before. So this just allows you to squeeze more profit out of an asset that you already own.
That's great. And we'll delve into that. But I do have a question first. Can you tell us about your company, what kind of services you provide, ADU Gold? Is it all inclusive? Do you just do design or you do construction or some of that or all of that?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And it's, really, it is a very, very long and complicated process. So for us to be full service, we have to have the ability to offer all of the different parts, which are from beginning to end, the architectural, the engineering, the expediting. That is the person that actually takes those completed plans to the city and takes it through the permitting process. And then the actual contractor construction services. All of those are vital in the process. And so somebody's got to do all those things. So we had already been doing all those things in our development business. So we did offer that. Now we've gotten to the point where we're really not doing too much of that retail work anymore. Now the jobs that we're doing with all of our resources we're actually partnering with development people that want to build property, and we partner with them where we supply all of the building stuff And then on the back end of the deal, then we're partners with them and we have buyout clauses. We can hold, we can sell. It's very flexible.
That sounds exciting. So, go back to apartment buildings. Is there a minimum lot size owners need to have if they want to add units to their apartment building? Or how does that work in terms of figuring out what you could build or how many units you could build in an apartment building?
Yeah, that's a good question. And for the actual ADU part of the equation, and this is the multifamily or single family, there technically is no minimum lot size. However, just as a little aside to that, one of the new laws that actually is kind of part of the ADU world is the SB 9 law. And that allows single family properties only at this point to subdivide their property into two separate legal lots. And on each lot, they can put 2 units. And under SB 9, there is, I laugh when I say this, there is a minimum lot size. It's, this is bizarre, but you can actually subdivide a 2,500 square foot lot into 2 lots. So
2 divisible lots.
Yeah, and on each one of those you could put 2 units. Now, why they even bothered to put that as a minimum is kind of crazy because the percentage of properties that are smaller than that right now is like probably less than 1% of all the lots in the state of California. But otherwise, there are no minimum lot size requirements.
So another question, is it difficult to get permits to get ADUs in apartment buildings? How's the process? Are cities reluctant to issue them or do they just give them outright?
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is one of the biggest challenges in ADU development is that almost all of the laws to date are state laws. So they apply across the state and they're what they call a mandate, which means all cities have to allow it. However, that said, there are some cities that from the beginning of this ADU process that have fought it tooth and nail, continue to fight it tooth and nail. Hello, Huntington Beach, which have been sued twice already by the state and lost twice. And that's just an ongoing thing. So it really does depend on the individual city on how much they embrace it or fight it. Most cities now, from the original ADU stuff, have been, even ones that were initially reluctant on it, have come 180 degrees to where they're promoting it and even offering incentives to build them. So almost all cities in California now do allow them, and the majority of them actually encourage it.
How about the city of LA particularly? Are they pretty ADU friendly?
Yeah, and that's really been one of the most important aspects to the development of the whole movement is that Los Angeles has, from the very beginning, been very pro-housing creation minded, and as they should be, because of course they're the biggest city. They have the biggest challenges in addressing the housing shortage, and the only way to do that, there's not like vacant land, so we have to increase density. So they embraced it, and they're actually on the forefront of adding even a few extra layers to it.
I've even heard the city of LA provides plans for various designs for ADUs that you could just pick up from the city. Is that correct? Or maybe predetermined layouts that make it easier or quicker to get these permits? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they have some pre-approved plans. Now they have a program for that, encouraging that. And there are many, many plans to pick from in there. They're doing those things towards the goal, of course, of trying to streamline the process and make it as fast and as easy as possible for the consumers, which is, in theory, a great idea. In reality, even working with pre-approved plans, it unfortunately still is a very cumbersome process. And LA is actually on the forefront of this in trying to make it faster, and they've done very well. So typically we can get an ADU permit from the time we submit to the time it's approved in about 3 months, which is really pretty remarkable. And just
application to get in the permit.
Exactly. And just to give you an example of this, the city of LA and the unincorporated areas of LA County are two different entities, but they have almost exactly the same regulations. As I said, we can get that ADU permit in the city of LA in 3 months. The exact same permit in the county of LA unincorporated, even with the same regulations, takes 1 year. So it really depends on the bureaucracy that you're dealing with, on how long that process takes and how difficult it is.
And I would imagine those plans may be good for owners of single-family properties, but for apartment buildings, I can't imagine them being very helpful, right? Because you're not necessarily building an ADU on a flat part of the lot, right? You're building a unit, maybe converting existing space. Is that right?
Well, I'll give you just kind of brief background on that. Under the multifamily ADU law, there's two separate parts. One is the kind of the universal part, and that is any multifamily zone property in the state of California now has a by right ability to add 2 new ADUs that have to be detached from the original structure. It can either be attached to each other or not, but by right 2 units. Separate from that is another part of the law called the 25% conversion rule. This allows multifamily owners to add 25% more new ADU units based on their existing unit count. So if they had a 4-unit building, 25% would be 1. 8 would be 2, so forth and so on. The interesting part about that part of the law is that there's theoretically no limit to the number of ADU units. We have multifamily clients that have 100-unit apartment buildings. They can add 25% more units. That's 25 more units.
That's a lot of units.
Right. But the catch to that is that has to be the conversion of existing non-living space. So in an apartment building, some examples would be a boiler room, a storage room, anything like that. But it also includes, as all ADU does, you can convert existing parking, into ADUs as well. So our typical 100-unit apartment building has tuck-under parking. That tuck-under parking can be turned into those new ADUs under that 25% conversion. So in a typical apartment complex, you've got vacant land, you got empty land you could work with to build your by right ones. And then the conversion ones would have to be the conversion of some space that's already there, as I said, either boiler, storage rooms, or parking.
So does that mean you could build, can you combine those two laws and say you could build 2 detached from the building plus 25%?
I love the way your head thinks, because that was what we always, were hoping it would be. In the beginning, the state law was a little vague on that, although both were legal. It didn't initially say specifically that the cities had to allow both. So initially, some cities were saying, well, it's one or the other, but not both. But they went back and actually clarified that language a couple years later. And so now all cities have to allow both.
So you can convert parking spaces, you said, into ADUs, or just converting a boiler room, maybe an office.
Right.
So how does that affect parking? Aren't you getting rid of parking to existing clients or tenants? And aren't you supposed to have parking for these new ADUs? What is the law on that?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that the lawmakers were looking at when they designed the original ADU laws is that universally, ADUs have to be built in back of existing structures or to the side. Of course, in virtually no properties is room on the side. And they did that specifically to address the concerns that the people that are against this, and there's a name for them, they're called NIMBYs, which is not in my backyard. And it's just kind of hilarious because, almost everybody agrees we need to build more housing. We have a housing shortage. The NIMBYs go, yes, we need to build it, just not wherever I am.
Right. It's always the case,
That's right. So it's not my backyard. Somebody else's is fine. But they put it together, and So they put up these structures in back of structures so that visually, when you go down a street, and this is already proven to be true, if you drive down a street and 3 or 4 of those houses have ADUs in back and the street next over has none, driving down the street, you probably not be able to see any different whatsoever. So it has to be in the backyard, but then that presented the challenge the lawmakers had to figure out. If it has to be built in back of a house, and you've got setback requirements, and if you had to not only have the space to build the structure, but then to build not only the parking space, but the access to that parking space and the turnaround space and all the parking things that are involved, there would be no room. Right. So something had to give. So that's what they decided to do, was to eliminate the parking requirement. And if you are using existing parking to do that, you do not have to replace that parking either. And they didn't just do that willy-nilly. I mean, they put a lot of thought into this. And this is just a change in our society. I deal a lot with the multifamily clients now, and more are telling me that their new, typically younger tenants don't even own cars. Now, for people from my generation, when I turned 18, the day I turned 18, I was at DMV getting my driver's license. That's right. That was a rite of passage. That's just not true anymore. Because one of the biggest things that's changed, of course, is that when anybody wants to go somewhere now, all they got to do is push a button on their phone and a car magically appears and takes them wherever they want to go. And that's just where society is heading. In Santa Monica, they already have robo-taxis rolling the streets with no drivers in them. Wow. So that's coming real fast. So that gave them kind of a little bit more confidence that looking towards the future, we just don't need as much space that's dedicated to parking. And here's an interesting statistic. In the city of Los Angeles, for every car, there's 8 parking spots.
Really?
Exactly. So even if your car is parked, there's 7 other parking spots empty in the city to accommodate your car. Well, multiply that times millions of cars, and just imagine the amount of space that is just sitting there empty, constantly doing nothing to accommodate this parking thing. So it's just an evolving part of our society, and it is working. And just an aside on that, I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving any legal advice, but I've spoken to many attorneys on this issue. Unless there's something very specific contrary to this in the lease, every landlord basically has the right to withdraw what's called an amenity, and that's what parking is considered. Now, they may have to compensate the tenant who signed a lease that included parking if you take the parking away, but that would be based on the value of a park spot. And so that does make that possible, that process.
And I have had a couple of multifamily clients who that's exactly what they've done. They've negotiated a lower rent for the existing tenants because they're losing a spot or two. Right. But, the tenant gets the advantage of paying less rent. They may not be, like you said, utilizing all the parking spots. Right. And now the landlord gets to add another unit. So I think it's a win-win for everyone.
Exactly. And so all these things have really been put together. And just a quick side on that, Californian is known as being, real groundbreaking in these kind of things in particular, but they aren't the first on this. The first that I heard about it was in Portland, Oregon. That was where it started, but that isn't even the original. The original, as far as I've been able to determine, was actually in Canada, in Vancouver, where they're called laneway houses because they call alleys laneways there. And that's where it actually started. So it's a really, really well thought out concept. But California is by far and away has the best state law of it that is the most promoting of the concept.
Right. And, recently I was in Washington State. I have a buddy out there who lives out there, and he was telling me they also have ADU laws. And so It seems like it's a national trend, right? Yep. Lots of big cities are realizing, like you said, there's not enough housing. people are moving into these big towns, and they need to figure out ways to increase the capacity of housing.
Yeah, I mean, and there's now ADU laws in at least parts of 37 states across our country now, and that list is growing every day.
And you would say California's on the forefront in terms of the new
Absolutely,
laws?
absolutely, yeah. They're definitely far and away the most dynamic in that.
And it's funny because normally you don't think of California being very landlord friendly or developer friendly, but this seems to be one of those rare occurrences where it really is favorable to landlords and developers because, like you said, now you can build additional units. And if you got 100 units, now you're adding 25 units. That's quite a bit of revenue, cash flow increasing, which is increasing the property value as well.
Yeah, it's exactly all of that. And the challenge, the bigger challenge also, besides just the need to create more housing, which is a big driver in what's been causing the prices to continue to just keep push in California in particular. But, we've reached now a kind of a critical point. And a quick story, I don't do much retail real estate work anymore, but I had a friend that had some friends that wanted to buy a new house. I decided to help them out. And they were very fortunate. Young couple, great paying jobs, parents helping them with a down payment. They were already pre-approved for up to a $950,000 purchase. Oh, I go, well, this will be easy. I'll get this done in a couple of weeks. I go out, I'm showing them property. I was showing them a property in Mount Washington, not far away from where we are right now.
Los Feliz area.
Yeah.
Beautiful place.
And it was listed at $890,000. Older house, needed, a lot of freshening, but nice. And we put an offer in at $920,000 because I knew it was going to be popular. There was 58 offers on the property. Wow. They didn't get that one. I go, well, that's not cool.
In
so
this market,
yeah. It was just a few months back.
Right.
So went out and found another house, kind of similar area. That one was better. It was only 23 offers on that one. Didn't get that one. Didn't get the next one. I'm starting to freak out. I go, I've got a buyer that's almost got $1 million to spend on a starter home in Los Angeles, and I can't find one for them. So I decided to, suggest to them a new strategy. I go, let's find the worst fixer we can find in the neighborhood you want, because there's some new financing available through FHA that gives you both purchase money plus construction money to either rehab the house or add an ADU. And
is this for first-time owners or anyone?
Well, it's first-time program, but it just has to be owner occupants, can't be investors. And the cool part about that is that if you're going to build an ADU, they're actually going to use the future value of the rent you're going to create and apply that towards your income, towards qualifying for that loan.
Interesting.
So they were able to buy this house. They're not building an ADU, but they're going to fix it up. So the advantage is that we found them a house they could afford with the construction budget that it'll entail. And they'll walk into that house with instant equity, because I call it, this program, they flipped it to themselves. They looked at it just like a house flipper would. They found something, they figured out how much it would cost them, fix it up, figured out how much that would be worth on the back end. The difference is that profit, instead of going to them and going and doing another project, that's just equity that they instantly walk into. They get the house that they really want because they're fixing it up exactly the way they want, at the price they want, in the neighborhood they want. So I'm really excited about that.
And I remember when ADUs first came out, there was some issue with appraisals, right?
Yeah.
Banks weren't very sure how to appraise these properties with ADUs. How has that changed? Has that gotten any better? Are they more familiar with the idea of ADUs and how they add value?
Yes, and that is, unfortunately, that's just part of every real estate transaction. And in the beginning, it was a much bigger challenge. Now, because we're 5 years in, and because, I always tell this story, is that an appraiser's job is actually very simple. You give them a property address, they pull up the map, they draw a circle a half mile around it, they pull up all the properties that sold in the last year that are similar, they plus minus the bedroom, bathroom thing a little bit, boom, they've got the number. Simple. However, if they have to do that with a property that's got a ADU, and they have to go find other properties that had ADUs, in the beginning, there were none. So this is dangerous because now the appraiser has to actually think. And the way they think, of course, varies dramatically from person to person. Plus, there's another challenge in that. As one of the after effects of the market collapse is they put in all kinds of new regulations to prevent that from happening again. One is called the Dodd-Frank laws that went into that specifically addressed appraisals. So now appraisals are very, very tightly regulated. Nobody can talk to an appraiser. Back in the day, as a real estate agent, when a property was going to get appraised, I always met the appraiser there and made sure I gave him all the best comps that I could come up with just to add that little extra thing. You can't talk to the appraiser anymore. They're totally siloed. And they're also a lot different mentality because they're always thinking about one thing, and that is if that loan goes bad in the future for any reason, the first place they're going to look is back at that appraisal to make sure that appraisal was right in the first place. And if it wasn't, that appraiser is in trouble. So their default, because of all that, of course, is to appraise low because they can't get any trouble for that.
They need to be conservative.
That's right. They might make some people angry because they came in low, but they can't get in trouble for it. If they go too high, that could be a problem. So it is a little bit more of an issue for sure than it used to be. But as they become more popular in the market, there's more and more comps for them to work with, and it's working. And so just on the value perspective, I think a very simple way to look at this is whatever your house is worth per square foot in that location, that's what value your ADU should add per square foot in that location. And this is the magic part of the formula. It's expensive to build in Los Angeles and in California in general, and an all-in figure I can kind of give you is about $320 per square foot. And that's everything. As I said, the architectural, the engineering, the expediting, the cost of the permit, which is expensive, and then all the construction costs. It's going to about $320 a square foot. That's a lot of money. But in LA, the median price per square foot now is about almost $700 per square foot.
I was going to say 300 is not looking so bad.
Exactly. So the formulas all work.
That's great. So I want to shift kind of towards the owners of these apartment buildings. When they want to figure out if they could build ADUs and how they do that, they call you. How do you go about letting them know what they can do and they can't do? Do you go out to meet them? Do you kind of look at the facts online and see what kind of property it is? Can you kind of walk us through it, how they go about getting that done?
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought that up because if there's one step in the process that's the most important, that's it. I mean, before you do anything, you should have some professional organization do what's called a feasibility study. And then they will tell you based on your location and the jurisdiction that you're in exactly what your options are to build, and then some sort of a good estimate on how much that'll cost and how long it'll take. Our company has done those in the past, and it's a crucial first step in the process. Now, because I said we're not doing much of that retail work, I'm working with a new online company called Realm, REALM, and it's realmhomes.com. And they do that same thing, and they're really a great service because besides that, then they also will then, once you've decided what you really do want to build, they'll invite a minimum of 3 of their vetted contractors to come out and bid on the work. And they know they're bidding against each other, all designed to give the consumer the best information, the best quality contractors, hopefully, to start the process work and at the best price. And they charge, depending on the time and the special, anywhere from $300 to $500 for that. And I totally recommend them as a resource for that. But all ADU companies, anybody you talk to, always start with that process for sure.
Right. And you want to go with, I would imagine, experienced contractor in ADUs, right? Not just any contractor, your cousin who's built homes before, because the last thing you want to do is hire someone who doesn't have much experience. And now you're, like you said, it goes from applying to a permit to getting the permit 3 months. You don't want that suddenly going to 6 months, 9 months, and then building out takes a couple of years. And like you said, in real estate, trends are going up and down constantly. So you don't want that to happen.
For sure. And, I laugh about this because I've been in this business from the beginning, but suddenly all the kitchen remodels of the year became ADU experts overnight, and it does not work that way. There are a lot of very, very specific nuances to this kind of building, which makes it just even that much more critical to make sure that you're working with people that really know and have experience in this field, for sure.
And especially apartment building owners. I mean, you're running a business. You want to be able to collect rent on that new ADU as soon as possible versus dragging that out for too long.
Time is money.
Time is money. And so how long does it take approximately once you get that permit until you get that occupancy certificate? Is there a ballpark idea that you can give us, or is it really dependent on the property?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously it hugely depends on the scale of the project and any kind of physical things that might be involved in it and the bureaucracy of the environment that you're building it in. But once again, in Los Angeles, we can get that permit typically in about 3 months. And then the construction time will typically be in the 5 to 6 month range. So I always tell people, be prepared for a year. We might be able to get it done a little bit sooner. It might take a little bit longer, but as long as you're mentally ready for a year, you should be good.
Are there cities in California or Southern California particularly that are more difficult to build in? You said Huntington Beach is one. Are there others you could think of? Like, do you have any experience like in Glendale, Burbank, Pasadena area?
Beverly Hills, Culver City was, but they completely turned around. They're totally great now. Santa Monica is always been more of a challenge and continues to be. West Hollywood, same thing. Glendale, Burbank, Pasadena, all more challenging, but all do allow it, and it's just a longer, more grinding process and fewer opportunities than some of the surrounding communities.
And all the more reason to hire someone who's got that experience.
Exactly.
And financing, is there financing available for this? And do you offer financing as part of your services, or?
No, I'm not actually in the lending business, but of course, financing is so crucial. I mean, everyone goes, great idea. How do I pay for it?
That's right.
So I have to be up on all that. And there are more and more loans available specifically for this kind of development, very fortunately, which is not a big surprise. I think that process has been sped up even more because the market has slowed down in the traditional sense so much that the lenders need to look at alternative ways to lend money. So they really started to offer more and more aggressive programs. So there's a lot of cool stuff out there now.
So there is lending available. There's contractors out there who are experienced, and the company you referred to, realmhomes.com, they can really help owners figure out what they could build, how much it's going to cost, the financing and all that stuff. Really making it easy, right? As opposed to 2018 when you probably first got started in this.
For sure. I mean, it was just like walking into building safety with a set of plans. They go, "What's this?"
Right.
That's
you have to educate them, right?
Exactly. We had to actually educate them as to what an ADU was, and that, of course, all that stuff just added time. Just a kind of a wonderful story that I love to tell is that on that first one that we built, to get all the value out of that we could as a spec project, I designed that so that the ADU would have a rooftop deck. And I remember the exact moment the architect that we were working with was doing the expediting, and one day she came to me and said, "Seth, they like everything about the plans, but they're not going to let you build the rooftop deck. And I knew that that was very important monetarily. So I went into the city with our expediter and met with the planner to ask them why. And I had a good idea why before I went in, and it was as I suspected. When you walk into any building and safety department and you ask them if you can do something they haven't been asked before, guess what their default answer is? No.
Right.
Because they can't get any trouble for saying no.
Right.
But with building and safety departments, once they say something, yes to something new, that sets a precedence. And so they're very careful on that. So I talked to them and I said, well, here's what I think you should maybe think about in considering whether you should allow this or not. If we were just going to build a 2-story single-family home on the same lot, and you allowed us to build a rooftop deck on that, and I already, of course, knew to the answer to that in that location, that would absolutely be a yes. If you would allow it on that, why wouldn't you allow it on an ADU?
Right. What's the difference?
Yeah. What's the difference? And he goes, that makes sense. I'll go talk to my supervisor. And 2 days later, that no turned into a yes. So I single-handedly set the precedence for building rooftop decks on ADUs in the city of Los Angeles.
Probably why you're known as the ADU guy, right?
Mr. ADU.
Mr. ADU. That's
ADU.
right.
Yeah,
that's right. So what are some of the challenges for ADU building, maybe particularly to apartment building owners or just in general? What do you see as some of the common challenges?
Well, one of the challenges that was there that went away is that, because they changed the law, was that those 2-by-right units that we originally talked about that a multifamily can do, originally in the state law, it limited them to a maximum of 16 feet in height, which is actually just underneath what you need to build 2 stories. And we had a lot of multifamily people that had like detached garages on the back of their property, and they wanted to add ADUs, and they just wanted to add them above those parking structures, but they couldn't. So that law basically was requiring them to eliminate parking and push it out in the street to build ADUs, which didn't make any sense. So actually in 2023, just actually this year still, they raised that to 18 feet. So now you can build 2-story. So if you wanted to, you could actually keep existing parking and build above it. But just in general, some of the challenges are, besides the setback requirements, which they made very reduced in the state law, which is 4 feet side and back. If you go 2-story in most places, they'll bump that up to 5 feet. But where there's a lot of variability is that building separation requirements. Every city requires buildings to be a certain distance from each other. And in the city of LA, that's 10 feet, a minimum. And that can be a challenge because that 10 feet, given that small amount of space we have, might be the difference of whether you could physically fit something in or not. But under the multifamily rules, everything's different. In the city of LA, there's actually no building separation required at all.
Wow, they really are working to help this get going.
Yeah, they want to squeeze as much in there as they can.
This is good. What's the minimum? Is there a minimum size unit that you need to have?
Yeah, there actually is.
Because I'm thinking like offices, right? If you get an office you want to convert, maybe it's 200 square feet. Is that possible?
You can. The minimum ADU requirement is 150 square feet. 150 square now, we've never built anything that small because that's just kind of crazy, but you actually technically could build one that small.
And I guarantee you it's LA. There will be someone who's willing to pay you rent for it.
That's right. Well, that's the thing is that, once we are talking to multifamily people and they're okay, we're going to do this now. What do they build? What size units do they build? And that really kind of depends a lot on the location. And one of the things that's interesting is that when I'm, penciling this stuff out for clients, I'll look at a service called Rentometer and to look at what are the rent values in a specific location. And typically the rent value going from a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom, it's pretty consistent. It'll be an extra $500 per bedroom, basically, that you add on. But in some locations, typically more premium locations, it'll be $700 difference going from a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom. But going from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, it might be as much as a $2,000 difference.
$2,000 difference.
Yes.
Wow. Because it's rare for 3 bedrooms, right?
Right. Well, you would think, but in premium markets, bigger space actually gives you a bonus in value. So it all just kind of depends. And I really learned so much about this topic specifically from the multifamily people, because their number one metric they use when they're looking at any of these investments is their ROI, their return on investment. Right. And from that pure formula, actually smaller almost is always better because of that phenomenon of the rent. No matter how small it is, it will still get this amazing rent. And the smaller it is, the less it costs to build. So technically, you might actually end up with your highest return on the ROI by building the smallest unit. But your net actual dollar profit might be much more by building a much bigger unit, depending on the location.
Interesting. Either way, landlords have a lot to consider, right? I mean,
Yes.
there's a lot they could do to increase value,
Yeah.
to increase their cash flow. This is a great resource for multifamily, and I appreciate you coming out. I want to kind of end this with where do you see the laws go into? What's the trend? Is it getting better? Is there anything in the books that you're excited about, or are we just kind of going to see the same of what we've seen before?
Yeah, no, they continue. There's 2 new laws going into effect January 1 and, a week from now, basically, that are changing the game a little bit. One of them is potentially mind-bogglingly big, and that's going to make it possible for people that build ADUs to sell them separately as separate properties. And it's not a lot split process. It's more like a condoization process, but they will be able to sell them separately. The big difference with this state law is that it's not a mandate. So it's up to the individual cities of whether they want to allow this or not. I'm super confident that LA will. I'm still waiting for them to give me the official word on it, which hopefully will happen within the next few weeks. But it's just a simple thing. If you have a single family home and you build an ADU on it, now you have 2 units, it's worth a lot more. But those 2 units sold separately makes it even more valuable. Absolutely. That's just always going to be the case. So that's a huge one.
That is. Well, Seth, thank you for your time. I know you're a very busy guy, and you're the premier expert, and we've seen today why you are the expert. You know this thing inside out. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule, and we look forward to talking to you again and seeing all the exciting things you're going to be doing with you and your company, ADU Gold. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to talking again in the future.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right.